The moment I saw those blue and red lights flashing through the pine trees, I knew Patricia Bellman had finally lost her mind. 2 patrol cars came screaming down our private mountain road, sirens wailing like the world was ending. Deputy Harrison jumped out with his hand on his weapon, ready for whatever dangerous criminal the HOA president had reported this time. What he found was my 87-year-old grandfather in his favorite fishing vest, holding a bag of birdseed and staring at Patricia with the kind of bemused expression he usually reserved for reality TV shows. She was standing there in her ridiculous sun visor, pointing at him like he was public enemy number 1. "He's trespassing," she shrieked in that voice that could peel paint. "This vagrant broke into the Riverside property. I demand you arrest him immediately." My grandfather just adjusted his hearing aid and gave her a slow smile. "Ma'am, I was in Army intelligence during Vietnam. I've survived jungle warfare, 2 divorces, and that time I accidentally ate my wife's experimental casserole. You really think your little temper tantrum is going to rattle me? Let me back up about a month, because you need to understand how we got to this insane moment. My name is David Parsons, and I'm a software developer who recently inherited a beautiful cabin in Pine Ridge Estates. One of those gated mountain communities where people have too much money and way too much time on their hands. I wasn't looking for trouble when I moved in. All I wanted was a peaceful place to work remotely, maybe do some hiking on the weekends, and enjoy the mountain air. The cabin had been in our family for decades, a modest frame nestled between towering evergreens, with a view that could make you forget all your problems. But peace was apparently not in Patricia Bellman's vocabulary. She ran the HOA like her own personal kingdom, and from the moment I arrived, she made it clear that I was not welcome in her domain. That IT started with a knock on my door exactly 3 days after I moved in. "Mr. Parsons," she said, with a smile that never reached her eyes. "I'm Patricia Bellman, president of the Pine Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. I noticed you haven't submitted your exterior modification request for that bird feeder." I blinked at her, genuinely confused. "The bird feeder that's been there since my uncle built this place in 1985. Her smile tightened. "All exterior features must be approved by the architectural committee. I'll need you to remove it until proper paperwork is filed. Also, that welcome mat needs to go. The bylaws clearly state that all entrance mats must be neutral brown or beige." I looked down at my mat, which had a picture of a bear that said, "Beware of a tax squirrel." My uncle's sense of humor, but I'd grown fond of it. "Are you serious right now?" "Deadly serious, Mr. Parsons. We have standards here." That was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Patricia launched what I can only describe as a campaign of suburban terrorism. She sent me violation notices for everything imaginable. My kayak was the wrong shade of green. The small vegetable garden behind the cabin was an unauthorized agricultural installation. Even the American flag I flew was apparently 3 inches too large, according to subsection 12.4 of the community guidelines. I tried to be reasonable at first. I attended an HOA meeting, thinking maybe we could work things out like adults. Big mistake. Patricia held court like a queen, addressing peasants, dismissing every concern with a wave of her manicured hand. When I pointed out that my cabin had existed in its current state for decades without issue, she actually said, "Previous negligence doesn't excuse current violations." The other board members just sat there like scared rabbits, too afraid to contradict her. I learned later that she'd driven out anyone who dared challenge her authority. The woman was drunk on whatever tiny amount of power being the HOA president gave her. Things escalated when I caught her on my property, taking photos of my back deck. I have security cameras a necessity when you work with sensitive data, and there she was at 7 o'clock in the morning, creeping around with her phone like some bargain bin spy. "What are you doing on my property?" I asked, stepping outside with my coffee. She didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. "Documenting violations. That deck stain is clearly not on the approved color list." "Get off my property, Patricia. It's Mrs. Bellman to you. And I have every right to ensure compliance with community standards." "No, you have every right to leave before I call the real police and report you for trespassing." She huffed and stomped off, but not before taking more photos. That's when I knew this was going to get worse before it got better. I started keeping detailed records of every interaction, every violation notice, every time I caught her lurking near my property line. Then Grandpa Joe decided to visit. My grandfather is one of those men who seems larger than life, despite being barely 5'8". He spent 30 years in the military, another 20 running his own construction company, and retirement hadn't slowed him down one bit. At 87, he could still outwork men a third his age, and had a wit sharp enough to cut glass. "This place hasn't changed a bit," he said, looking around the cabin with misty eyes. "Your uncle and I built that deck with our bare hands. Used to sit out there and solve all the world's problems over a beer or three." I warned him about Patricia, but Grandpa just laughed. "Son, I've dealt with bureaucrats, drill sergeants, and your grandmother when she was angry. Some suburban busybody doesn't even make my top 10. He should have taken it more seriously." The very next morning, while I was inside on a video call with the client, Grandpa decided to fill the bird feeders and spread some seed for the local wildlife. He was out there in his old fishing vest, humming some Johnny Cash song, completely in his element. That's when Patricia struck. She must have been watching, waiting for any opportunity to cause trouble. Instead of approaching him like a normal person, she immediately called 911 and reported an elderly vagrant breaking into the property. I didn't know any of this was happening until I heard the sirens. By the time I got outside, the scene was already unfolding like some bizarre comedy sketch. 2 deputies had arrived, clearly expecting something serious based on Patricia's hysterical call. "Ma'am, can you please calm down and explain the situation?" Deputy Harrison was saying, trying to make sense of the scene. "This man broke into the riverside cabin," Patricia insisted, gesturing wildly at my grandfather. "He's probably homeless, looking to squat on the property. I've never seen him before in my life." "That's because you've never bothered to actually meet your neighbors," Grandpa said calmly, still holding his bag of birdseed. "I'm David's grandfather. Been coming to this cabin since before you were born." "A wager lies," Patricia screeched. "Officers, I demand you arrest this man immediately." I stepped forward, trying to control my anger. "Officers, this is my grandfather, Joseph Parsons. He's my guest, and this woman has been harassing me for weeks." Deputy Harrison looked between us, clearly realizing this was not the emergency he'd been led to believe. "Sir, do you have any identification?" Grandpa reached for his wallet slowly, making sure the officers could see his movements. "Of course I do. Though I've got to say, in all my years, this is the first time I've been accused of breaking into my own family's property." While Deputy Harrison ran Grandpa's license, Patricia continued her rant about property values and community standards and the danger of allowing transients in the neighborhood. She was so caught up in her own self-importance that she didn't notice the change in the deputy's expression when the background check came back. "Mr. Parsons," Deputy Harrison said, his entire demeanor shifting to one of respect. "It says here you're a decorated veteran Silver Star, Bronze Star, Purple Heart. Thank you for your service, sir." Grandpa just nodded. "Just did my job, deputy. Though I never thought I'd need military honors to put out birdseed on my own family's property." "This is ridiculous," Patricia sputtered. "I don't care if he's the president. He doesn't live here, and there are rules about long-term guests." "How long have you been visiting, Mr. Parsons?" the deputy asked. "Got here yesterday afternoon, planning to stay through the weekend, help my grandson with some repairs." Grandpa's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Though I'm starting to think the thing most in need of repair around here is this lady's attitude." I pulled out my phone, unable to resist anymore. "Officers, I've been documenting Mrs. Bellman's harassment for weeks. I have security footage of her trespassing on my property multiple times, taking photos, even attempting to measure my deck railings without permission." Patricia's face went from red to purple. "Those were official HOA inspections, for which you need to provide 24 hours notice and have reasonable cause," I said. "I looked up the actual laws. Patricia, not just your made-up rules." Deputy Harrison's partner, a younger officer named Rodriguez, was trying hard not to smile. "Mrs. Bellman, making false emergency calls is a serious matter. You reported a break-in and a dangerous vagrant. What we have here is a decorated veteran visiting his grandson, but he was distributing unauthorized wildlife feed," Patricia stammered, grasping at straws. "Birdseed," Grandpa said flatly. "I was putting out birdseed in bird feeders that have been on this property since the Reagan administration, ma'am," Deputy Harrison said, his patience clearly wearing thin. "I'm going to strongly suggest you return to your home and reconsider your approach to neighborhood relations. Mr. Parsons, both of you, I apologize for the inconvenience." But Patricia wasn't done. As the deputies prepared to leave, she pulled out her phone and started recording. "This is going in my official HOA report. You'll be hearing from our lawyer. That was her biggest mistake." Grandpa's expression shifted from amused to seriously irritated. "Lawyer, huh? Well, that's interesting, because my poker buddy Harold just happens to be one of the best property law attorneys in the state. Retired now, but he loves a good HOA overreach case. Says they're like shooting fish in a barrel." For the first time since I'd met her, Patricia actually looked uncertain. "You're bluffing." Grandpa pulled out his own phone, an ancient flip phone that he somehow made look intimidating. "Harold? Yeah. It's Joe. Remember that case we were talking about last week? Well, I've got a live one for you." I don't know if Harold was even on the other end of that call, but Patricia didn't stick around to find out. She practically ran back to her house, probably to call an emergency HOA meeting and spin this whole thing in her favor. The deputies left after making sure we were okay, and Deputy Harrison even gave me his card. "If she keeps harassing you, don't hesitate to call. False emergency reports are no joke." That evening, Grandpa and I sat on the deck with a couple of beers, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "You know she's not going to let this go," I said. "Oh, I'm counting on it," Grandpa replied, with a grin that would have looked more at home on a mischievous teenager. "See, what your HOA president doesn't realize is that I didn't just serve in intelligence. I spent my last 10 years in the military working with JAG on property disputes at bases around the world, and Harold, he really is one of the best property lawyers in the state. We've been friends since boot camp." "You're serious?" "Deadly serious. That woman made 3 critical errors today. First, she filed a false police report. Second, she admitted on camera to systematic harassment. And third, she picked a fight with someone who's got nothing but time and a deep appreciation for justice. Over the next few days, things moved faster than I could have imagined. Harold, who turned out to be very real and very interested in the case, sent Patricia and the HOA board a cease and desist letter that was a masterpiece of legal writing. It outlined every violation of state law and HOA regulations that Patricia had committed, from trespassing to harassment to abuse of power. But the real bombshell came when Harold discovered something interesting. In the HOA's financial records, which were supposed to be public, Patricia had been using HOA funds to install security cameras around the neighborhood, but specifically positioned to monitor the homes of people she didn't like. She'd also been billing the HOA for administrative expenses that coincidentally matched her monthly car payment. The emergency board meeting that followed was the most entertaining Pine Ridge Estates had seen in years. I wasn't supposed to be there, but as a homeowner, I had every right to attend. The community center was packed, with standing room only. Patricia tried to maintain control, but the other board members had finally found their spines. When Harold presented his findings complete with documentation that would make an accountant weep with joy, the room erupted. "You've been using our dues to spy on us?" shouted Mrs. Henderson from 2 houses down. "And paying for your Mercedes?" added Tom Sullivan, who'd been fined last year for having the wrong type of mailbox. Patricia's attempts to explain fell on deaf ears. The board voted unanimously to remove her as president, effective immediately, but that wasn't the end of it. The district attorney's office, alerted by Harold's findings, opened an investigation into misuse of funds and violation of privacy laws. 2 months later, I got a call from Harold. "Thought you'd want to know," he said, barely suppressing his glee. Patricia just agreed to a plea deal. 18 months probation, $50,000 in restitution to the HOA, and 200 hours of community service. $50,000. I nearly choked on my coffee. Turns out she'd been skimming for years. The car payments were just the tip of the iceberg. Oh, and she's banned from serving on any HOA board in the state ever again. I thought about calling Grandpa with the news, but decided to wait until his next visit. He'd want to hear this in person, probably over a beer on the deck that had caused so much trouble. The new HOA president, Mrs. Henderson, stopped by last week to apologize for everything that had happened. "We should have stood up to her years ago," she said. "Your grandfather did us all a favor. These days, Pine Ridge Estates is a much more peaceful place. The bird feeders are full. My kayak remains gloriously non-compliant with the old color guidelines. And my bear welcome mat greets visitors with its promise of attack squirrels. As for Patricia, I saw her last week at the grocery store in town. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and practically dove behind a display of canned goods when she spotted me. The woman who once terrorized an entire neighborhood with her petty tyranny was reduced to hiding behind soup cans. When I told Grandpa about it during his last visit, he just smiled and refilled the bird feeders. 'You know what the real tragedy is,' he said. 'If she'd just been neighborly from the start, none of this would have happened. Could have saved herself $50,000 and a criminal record just by being decent.' He was right. Of course, Patricia's downfall wasn't really about bird feeders or deck stains or unauthorized vegetables. It was about what happens when someone mistakes a tiny bit of authority for actual power and picks a fight with the wrong family. The last time I checked, Patricia had sold her house and moved to a different town, probably for the best. It's hard to maintain your dignity in a neighborhood where everyone knows you as the former HOA president who called the cops on an 87-year-old veteran for feeding the birds. I'm still here in my cabin, still feeding those birds, still flying my slightly too large American flag. The new HOA board even made Grandpa an honorary member. After everything that happened, he's got the certificate framed in his living room, right next to his military honors. Fought communists, terrorists, and now HOA tyrants, he likes to say. The tyrants were definitely the most annoying. Patricia Bellman learned the hard way that sometimes the most dangerous enemy isn't the one with the biggest weapon or the loudest voice. Sometimes it's the quiet grandfather with a bag of birdseed and decades of experience in making bullies regret their life choices. Her 18 months of probation started last month. And every hour of that community service is a reminder that karma, like Grandpa Joe, has a very long memory and a wicked sense of humor.